Emma Carter walked into the house with 2 grocery bags in hand. The long workday at the law office exhausted her, but she still tried to stop by the supermarket to buy ingredients for dinner. She's always believed that a good meal can help people reconnect, especially since her husband Michael has become increasingly distant lately. Putting the bag on the kitchen table, she called out, "Michael, are you home yet?" There was no reply. Emma sighed, washed her hands, and started cooking. She purposely prepared Michael's favorite dish, grilled chicken with BBQ sauce and mashed potatoes. While preparing to set the table, she heard the door open. Michael walked in, his face gloomy. His tie was loose, his shirt wrinkled. She turned back to look at her husband, smiling gently. "Hello, how was your day today?" Michael threw his bag on the sofa and then dropped down, exhaling. He mumbled, "I was demoted." Emma was stunned. "What? What happened?" Michael didn't look at his wife, just rubbed his temples. "They said the company needed to restructure. I was no longer CFO, demoted to department manager. Salary cut. Benefits cut." Emma put her hand on her husband's shoulder, trying to comfort him. "Michael, we will get through this. Work is stable, and if needed, I can work overtime." Michael pushed her hand away, his voice full of bitterness. "Don't say such cliches, Emma. You don't understand this feeling." Emma paused. What did she expect? That my husband will share my feelings? That he would let her help? But instead, he looked at her as if she were a stranger. Dinner took place in silence. Michael barely touched the food. Emma picked up a piece of chicken, but before she could eat it, her mother-in-law Barbara spoke up. "Emma, don't you think you should eat less?" She froze, the fork floating in midair. Sophie, her daughter, looked at her grandmother with wide eyes. "Grandma." Barbara shrugged, sipping her tea. "I'm just telling the truth. Women your age who don't keep fit are easily bored by their husbands." Emma felt her face heat up. She put down her fork, trying to stay calm. "You're still healthy," the doctor said. Michael suddenly spoke up, his voice cold. "You don't need a doctor to tell you, Emma. You've gained weight. You're no longer the same as when we first got married." Those words were like a knife stabbing straight into her heart. She looked at her husband, searching for something, a sign of playfulness, a hint of remorse. But nothing. Just bored eyes and contempt. Emma stood up. "You don't need to hear these things." She turned to walk away, but Barbara's voice followed like a ghost. "Just the truth, daughter-in-law." Sophie threw her fork on the table, her voice angry. "Dad, why did you say that to Mom?" Michael didn't bother to answer. He stood up, left the table behind, and went straight upstairs. Emma was speechless. The next morning, she woke up and realized the Cold War has begun. Michael didn't say good morning. Don't look at her. Don't say a word. When she made coffee and set a cup down in front of her husband, he pushed it aside as if it were invisible. Mrs. Barbara looked triumphant. "It seems like someone is being ignored." She smiled faintly. Emma quietly left the table, feeling as if she were being pushed out of her own life. Sophie came to her mother's side and gently held her hand. "Mom, you don't have to endure this." Emma smiled softly, but inside she knew. Everything was falling apart. In the following days, Emma began to clearly feel changes in her relationship. Michael doesn't seem to care about her anymore. They live under the same roof, but the distance between them is even greater. Every morning, when Emma woke up, she no longer saw the loving eyes or loving words she had hoped for. Michael just quietly went to work, without sharing a word. When she tried to talk to him, he always found a way to avoid her. She realized that things were changing and there was nothing she could do about it. She is busier with work, trying to maintain everything normal, but Michael is not. While she still worked, took care of the family, and kept everything going, he only lived in the shadow of failure. Every time he returned home, Emma always saw him walking in with a cold look, not the least bit interested in what she did. She wondered if she had been so wrong in hoping for a change. At dinner, when Emma put the plate of food on the table, Michael didn't even look at it, just ate quietly in silence. This feeling of being ignored gradually turned into a deep pain. One day, while washing dishes, she heard Michael's footsteps coming from the stairs. She turned around and saw him standing in the kitchen door, not saying a word. "Michael," she began, trying to create a semblance of harmony. "Do you want to say anything? Can I help you?" Michael just shook his head, not answering. She saw in his eyes a coldness that she couldn't explain. He no longer cares about her. "Why are you so quiet?" Emma asked, feeling like all her emotions are frozen. "I don't want to talk to anyone anymore, Emma. I'm so tired," Michael replied, his voice cold. Emma stood there, her heart choked. She didn't know what to do. She still tried to maintain the relationship, but Michael no longer wanted to participate. With each passing day, his coldness made Emma feel more and more invisible. "Did I do something wrong?" she wondered. "It feels like he doesn't love me anymore." That night, while lying in bed, Emma quietly looked up at the ceiling. Michael lay with his back turned, saying nothing. She couldn't sleep. She felt abandoned and extremely lonely. She remembered the days before when they sat together, talked happily, and shared everything in life. But now, all she gets is silence. Even the small gestures that she once thought were normal have now become luxuries. One day, while cleaning the living room, Emma noticed that Michael was not in the house. She took out her phone and sent him a short text message. "I need to know, where are you?" Michael replied immediately, "I'm working overtime." His response was like a blow to her heart. Didn't ask or care about her feelings at all. Emma feels like she's living in a meaningless relationship. The following days, the situation did not change. Michael continued to be cold, without an apology, without a gesture of concern. Emma began to feel exhausted. Any hope she had retained of reconciliation seemed to be gone. She began to look for small joys to help her forget Michael's coldness. But the more she tried, the more she felt like she was losing herself. Every morning when she wakes up, Emma feels like she is falling into a deep hole with no way out. There was no love, no understanding, only coldness and ignorance from her husband. And then, one evening after Michael left again without a word, Emma decided she couldn't go on living like this anymore. She needed to make a decision, even if it was painful. That night, after Sophie had fallen asleep, Emma took out the divorce papers she had prepared a long time ago. She looked at it and felt a deep sadness, but she knew she couldn't continue living like that. When Michael came home, she didn't wait for him to speak. "Michael, we need to talk," Emma said, her voice firm. Michael just turned back to look at her with nothing but indifference. "I want a divorce," she said, placing the paper on the table. Michael was stunned, then looked at her with suspicious eyes. "I didn't think you would," he muttered. Emma stood up and looked straight at him. "I can't continue living in a relationship like that. I tried, but you're no longer here with me." Michael said nothing. He just sat there, silent. Emma felt more relieved than ever, although there was still some regret in her heart. In the end, she decided not to let herself be sucked into this deep hole anymore. And at that moment, an important decision was made. She would walk away, even though it was painful, but she would not let herself be abandoned anymore. This ending is not the end for everything, but the beginning of a new life. A life that Emma will control. No more Michael, no more Barbara, no more insults. The next day, when Emma woke up, she felt something new. Michael is no longer around, and Sophie has gone to school, leaving an unusually quiet space. She looked around the house, which was once filled with laughter and warmth, now empty and cold. Emma felt a change in her heart, a strong feeling that she could no longer live in this relationship. She had thought about divorce many times, but today was different. She no longer feels scared or worried about the consequences. She felt she was ready. While Emma was cleaning the living room, her phone suddenly vibrated. Here's a message from Michael. "We need to talk when you get home." The feeling in Emma's heart became indescribable. She sighed and replied briefly, "You don't need to say anything else. I've decided." After that, she turned off the phone and continued with housework. But not long after, Michael returned. This time, he didn't approach her right away, but just stood at the living room door. "Emma, can we sit down and talk?" Michael said softly. Emma turned around, looked into his helpless eyes, then replied, "I don't need to say anything more, Michael. I've made my decision." Michael stepped closer, his eyes worried. "I can't do that. We have children." "Yes, we still have Sophie," Emma said, her voice determined. "But I can't grow up in a family where my parents no longer have feelings for each other. I can't live in this indifference anymore." Michael was silent, said nothing, just looked at the floor. Emma looked at his face, feeling regretful but also full of determination. "You know, Michael, I've been waiting for you for so long. I hoped you would change, would return to being the person I love. But no, you've gone too far." Michael raised his eyes to look at his wife, his eyes full of regret. "Can't you forgive me?" "It's not that I can't forgive. It's that I can't continue to hope for what you can't bring anymore." The two stood still in silence. No one said anything more. Emma walked to the table, took the prepared divorce papers, and placed it on the table in front of Michael. "This is my decision, and I want us to end here." Michael looked at the paper, unable to believe what he was seeing. "Do you really want a divorce?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "I can't live this lie anymore, Michael. You're no longer the man I fell in love with. I need to move on." Michael was silent, as if he had nothing more to say. A moment later, he just let out a bitter sentence. "So where are you going?" Emma looked into his eyes again, then answered softly, "I'll go with Sophie, to my family. I need time to find myself." Michael didn't answer. He just quietly stood up and went into the bedroom. Neither of them said anything more. There were no more explanations or pleas. Emma felt relieved, as if a burden had been lifted. She was no longer afraid, no longer worried about facing loneliness or suffering. She knew she would be okay, and she would move on. Sophie came home late in the afternoon and found her mother packing her things. "Mom, are we really going?" Sophie asked with a worried look on her face. Emma nodded, smiling. "We will leave and start a new life, a life without lies and pain." Sophie looked at her mother for a moment, then she hugged her mother. "I will always be by your side, Mom. You don't need to worry about anything." Emma felt her heart warm when she heard Sophie's words. She kissed her daughter's forehead and whispered, "Thank you, Sophie. I will never let you suffer again." They both packed their things and prepared for their new life. Emma decided that it was time for her to find herself again. When Sophie went to bed, Emma stood alone in the living room, looking around. She doesn't feel regret anymore. The years with Michael no longer mattered. She learned a valuable lesson. Life is mine, and I have to live for myself. That night, Emma signed the divorce papers and placed it on the table. She knew she did the right thing. The next morning, Emma and Sophie left the house they once called home, but now it was only a sad memory. They came to stay with Emma's family, and although everything seemed new and a bit strange, Emma felt a sense of relief. A week later, when Emma returned to the office, she saw her old boss, whom she had not seen for several months. "Hello, Emma," her old boss said when he saw her passing. "Thanks for coming back. We have a new project for you to participate in." Emma smiled, feeling a little confidence return. "I'm very willing," she replied, feeling like she was entering a new chapter of her life. When she returned to the office, a new feeling filled her. She is no longer the faint woman standing behind others. Emma has regained her strength and confidence. And the best thing is that she did it alone, without having to rely on anyone else. She walked into the office, looked ahead, and told herself that she would never go back to the past again. In the days after Emma and Sophie left the house, their lives gradually stabilized. At first, Emma felt like she had just begun a new life, full of hope and freedom. She had time to look back on the past years and the suffering she had to endure in her relationship with Michael. Even though there were nights when Emma felt empty, she knew she had chosen the right path. However, what she did not expect was the ending that Michael had for her. One afternoon, while Emma was working in the office, she received a text message from a strange phone number. "We need to talk. Can we meet?" She realized it was Michael. Feelings welled up in her heart. Part of her wanted to forget him, but part of her wanted to know what he would do next. She hesitated for a moment, then decided to answer. "What's the point of meeting, Michael? I have nothing more to say to you." After a few minutes, Michael called. She picked up the phone and heard his voice lower. "Emma, I know I was wrong. I don't want to lose you, but there's something you need to know." "What?" Emma asked, her heart pounding. Michael was silent for a moment, then said, "I did something I can't forgive myself for. I added spice to your drink that day." Michael's words came as a shock, making Emma unable to react. She stood there, unable to believe what she had just heard. Michael continued, his voice trembling slightly. "I thought it would help you lose weight. I just wanted to help you." She couldn't believe her ears. "What did you do?" Emma asked again, her voice filled with anger. Michael replied, not daring to look directly at her through the phone. "I put some spicy spices in your cocktail that day. I thought if you drank it, you would lose weight faster." Emma couldn't say a word, anger rising, almost suffocating her. "You're crazy, Michael. You can't do that to me. Who do you think you are? Do you want to kill me?" she shouted. Michael remained silent, not daring to say more. Emma hung up, dropped the phone on the table, filled with anger and disappointment. She couldn't bear it anymore. It is a betrayal that cannot be forgiven. She thought she had seen all the bad, but no, Michael had gone further. That whole night, Emma couldn't sleep. She recalls every little detail of her marriage. Michael was once the person she loved, the person she trusted. But now he has revealed his true face. She began to feel like she no longer knew who that man was. A few days later, Emma decided to face Michael again. She couldn't let him continue insulting her like this. When Michael arrived home one afternoon, Emma was waiting in the living room. When he entered, she said nothing, just stared at him. Michael felt uneasy. He looked at Emma but did not dare to come closer. I can't forgive you, Michael. You've done terrible things, and I can't live with someone like that, Emma said, her voice firm. Michael looked at her, his eyes full of regret and worry. I was wrong. You couldn't understand that I only wanted the best for you. I didn't know I went too far. Good for you? Emma smiled faintly. Do you think putting spices in my drink is good for me? You took away my right to choose. I'm not the one to decide for you anymore. Michael looked down at the floor, unable to meet his wife's eyes. What do you think you can do now? He asked, his voice filled with disappointment. Divorce? Emma didn't answer right away. She stood up, feeling like she was completely calm. Michael, I'm divorced. She had the right to do so, and I chose a different path for myself. Michael looked up, his eyes sparkling with a little hope, but Emma did not allow herself to be deceived again. I don't need you anymore, Michael. I'm tired of empty promises. It's over. She can't continue living with someone who no longer respects her. It's over, Michael, Emma said, her voice determined. Michael couldn't say anything more. They were both silent, only the stuffy air between them. Emma walked to the living room, grabbed her bag, and turned to look at Michael one last time. I did the right thing, Michael. Even though it hurts, I have to leave. Michael said nothing, just looked after her, and when Emma walked out the door, he was left with only loneliness. Emma felt her heart feel lighter than ever as she closed the door behind Michael. The immediate life seems to have no more constraints. Even though she had left everything she had ever been attached to, she knew that this was the beginning of a new life. She was no longer the overwhelmed woman in a toxic relationship. She can look forward without worrying about judgments or harsh words from her ex-husband. Her life is her own now, and she won't let anyone disrupt that. Sophie saw her mother rearranging the items in the house. She knew that this was an important step. Mom, what will we do next? Sophie asked, with a worried look on her face. Emma smiled. She sat down next to her daughter and stroked Sophie's hair. We'll be okay, baby. I'll find myself again. I'll live a life where I won't have to worry about someone hurting me. Sophie nodded, feeling the power in her mother's words. Emma has chosen a new path, and Sophie will always be her companion. The following weeks passed peacefully. Emma began returning to work with renewed focus. She no longer felt pulled back by negative emotions. With each passing day, she felt a new strength gradually return. She finds joy in simple things, in work, and even in quiet evenings with Sophie. One morning, while Emma was preparing breakfast for Sophie, she received an unexpected call from an unfamiliar number. She hesitated for a moment, then decided to pick up the phone. Hello, Emma. I'm Julia, Human Resources Director of XYZ Company. We have a big project and need someone with experience like you. Can you participate in this project? Emma was stunned for a moment, but then a slight smile appeared on her lips. I'm ready. This was the opportunity she had been waiting for. She realized that she was no longer the person standing behind someone's shadow. She was herself, and the world out there was waiting for her. While Emma begins to feel happy with her new job, her personal life also gradually changes. A week later, she met someone she never expected, her old boss, Jack. He followed her progress and noticed the potential she had. Emma, I heard about your job at the new company. I'm very impressed with what you've done, Jack said when they met at a coffee shop. Thank you, Jack. I didn't think I'd go this far after what happened, Emma replied, smiling. You always have potential, Emma. You just have to dare to step out of your shadow and explore it. If you need any support, I'm always here. Jack's words were a strong encouragement to Emma. she no longer feels alone in life. She realizes that there are people who still believe in her, and not everything ends in darkness. Gradually, Emma began to look at things with a different mindset. She knows that she has overcome great challenges, and now is the time to move forward, not looking back. One afternoon, while walking home, Emma suddenly met someone she did not expect. It was her boss, the man she had worked with before. "Hello, Emma," he said, smiling. "Need me to give you a ride?" Emma looked at him and smiled. "No thanks, I'm fine." But then she continued, "Actually, I have good news. I met someone special." He looked at her surprised but also happy. "Really? I'm glad to hear that." Emma nodded. "I didn't think I would find love again, but now I feel like anything is possible." It was an important turning point. Emma realized she didn't have to live in the past. She can create a new future for herself. No longer the woman of her painful years, she has found a part of herself that she had never imagined before. She knows that with faith in herself and love for her family, she can overcome any difficulty. When returning home, Emma felt her heart warmer than ever. Sophie was standing at the door, waiting for her to return. "Mom, can I go to school with you today?" Sophie asked. Emma nodded, feeling joy in every little moment of life. She knew she made the right decision. Life isn't always easy, but with confidence and love, Emma knows she will always find her way. "I will always be with you," Emma whispered. And from there, Emma's life began to write a new chapter. Not only is she stronger, but she's also living the life she's always dreamed of. Nothing can stop her, and she knows that she will never be defeated. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more emotional and inspiring tales, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We've got many more stories coming your way that you won't want to miss. By subscribing, you'll never miss out on our latest videos, packed with powerful moments and life-changing lessons. Join our community, share your thoughts in the comments, and let's keep the conversation going. We're so glad to have you with us. See you in the next story.